Well, isn't that a much lovelier view than we've been having in the UK as of late? So, good evening, everybody. It's been quite a while since the last time I did any kind of video at all. I am, of course, coming to you directly from this beautiful tropical desert island. It is 23 degrees in the sun. There are small fishes dancing around my feet, and unfortunately, a crab has decided that he wants to be more than just good friends. But never mind. So the purpose of this video is to discuss the new Ghostbusters film, written by and directed, I think, by Paul Feig, and starring Leslie Jones, Kristen Wiig, and two other actresses whose names immediately, of course, just before you feel the video, actually fly out of your head. McKinnon and I'm sure the other lady who was in Spy's name will come back to me very shortly. So the film is a reboot, a complete revamp of the Ghostbusters franchise, and and the big controversy about it originally when it came out was that it was for women characters, and there's obviously been quite a lot of very great amount of negativity towards the film. Will always be remembered, I think, as the most hated YouTube trailer of all time. Make of that what you will. But really, much of this, I think, can come down to a kind of a level of concern on the behalf of fans as to what kind of film they were going to get, concern on the behalf of a lot of them that what they saw as a very important part of their childhood. Obviously Ghostbusters came out in 1984, so to many millennials like myself, it's a film that we very much grew up with. I myself had a Ghostbusters proton pack when I was younger. I had many things. Don't worry about the island. The holograms just dissolving around me. It's all absolutely fine. And this was a film I loved very much. I'm happy to admit, I think as some people have, that perhaps Ghostbusters, the original, was certainly better than the second film. But I still think that they were together fantastic films. Love them to death. And so I went to see Ghostbusters last night. I went with my sister, and my sister had a very different experience with the film than I did. She hasn't seen the original Ghostbusters, so she had very little in the way of any baggage, you might say, actually going into the film. And I was worried going in, because I kind of thought, well, not a lot of what I've seen has looked particularly good. I wouldn't say it's necessarily been something where I've thought, yeah, that looks like a film I want to see. It didn't really have any of the kind of draw to me that I saw from other films. And unfortunately, it seems that much of the preconceptions were correct, because I really didn't like this film. And my criticisms of it really come down to 6 areas, 5 main ones and one that's a bit of a joke, but is true. The first, believe it or not, is actually the use of the theme. So the use of the Ghostbusters theme throughout this whole film, I felt, was just awful. Ghostbusters, the original theme by Trey Parker Jr., was an Emmy Award-winning piece of music. It is one of the most recognised and well-known and well-loved pieces of music. Forget about, as a theme song for a film, just as a piece of music in its own right, it's absolutely iconic. And in this film, it's taken and it's mashed in about 4 or 5 different ways. And there are about 4 or 5 different moments throughout the film where I personally, watching the film, thought, this is when they're going to make the thing, and now's when you play the theme, and at no point did it happen. When it did happen, it was your kind of modern, remix of like some weird Skrillex version of it, and then there was this kind of slightly rocky version of it, and all the way through, I just kept thinking, no. And the problem with any film will have is that if there's a moment where the audience get annoyed by something, or if it becomes like a continual sort of almost like a mosquito buzzing around your ear, you're never ever going to get rid of that, and it's going to destroy your enjoyment of the film because it takes you out of it and you become an observer rather than a participant. So I thought the theme and the remixing of the theme was awful. The second biggest problem with the film I had was that I actually just didn't find it very funny. A lot of people, the 4 actresses involved, I know are McCartney, that's the other one, are Melissa McCartney, are very funny, and in their own sort of pieces have done Saturday Night Live, etc. These are very, very funny women, and there's no doubt that they are all very funny women. The problem is they're not very funny in this film. and a lot of the jokes fall flat. There's a huge kind of emphasis early on kind of like body humour, which I actually just, I mean, this is personally just me, I don't find it particularly funny. For example, a previous film by Paul Feig, which I think actually shares a lot of the problems that Ghostbusters have, was actually Bridesmaids. I really didn't like Bridesmaids. I know a lot of people raved about it, but I really took against Bridesmaids in the scene in the Dress Fitters, because I felt that the kind of sudden need to descend into diarrhea and body humour was almost an attempt to be a sop to the men in the audience who have been dragged there by their girlfriends. And actually, one of the other things that definitely comes out, and this will, and I'll touch on this in a second, is actually the way that Paul Feig seems to treat men in his movies. I don't really quite understand it. But so point number 2 is effectively, as I said, that I just didn't find it funny. And quickly coming on to then point 3, every single male character in this film is either an idiot or a dick or a weirdo. And if you watch Bridesmaids, one of my main criticisms of it was that every single man in that film was a dick or a weirdo. There were no just normal run-of-the-mill guys. Everybody was a caricature. In this film we have Kevin, played by Chris Hemsworth, who's a sort of, hilarious, big, tall, dumb. I mean, he's effectively, I can see what they're doing. They're going for the dumb blonde. His role is the dumb blonde. But whereas in the original Ghostbusters, and I am going to keep saying that because you have to take them as two films, I think, together. Janine was, and her kind of infatuation with Egon Spengler was very funny. That wonderful line of, what do you do to keep, what do you do? I collect spores, molds and fungus. It was just one of the great lines. This was just, it was just a bit kind of tacky, and it just felt very forced the whole time. Anyway, so yeah, the portrayal of men in the film I thought was slightly strange. Problem number 4, though, and I think it's my main problem with the film, is the use of cameos and Easter eggs in a way that was completely and utterly jarring the whole way through. So there's about 5 or 6 instances throughout the film where characters, or not necessarily characters, but actors from the original Ghostbusters are thrust into it. And I think the only one who isn't in the film is actually Rick Moranis. But with obviously the exception of Harold Ramis, who passed away, and the nod to him is actually, his nod is all right. But the rest of them, it's really quite ham-fisted the way they sort of come in. And the Dan Aykroyd one in particular, and the lines that he's given, for me was the moment I genuinely took against the film and decided that I'd almost had enough of it. And if I hadn't been with my sister, I would have left. I thought it was ham-fisted. I thought it felt very much like it cheapened the original film, the way that those actors were treated, as in many cases kind of weird and a bit spaced out and a bit kind of gone with it. I genuinely thought that it treated the original Ghostbusters with a little bit of contempt. And the final problem I had with it is that actually, funnily enough, if anybody here has recently seen Deadpool, you had the cabbie, Dupinder, who was very funny and brilliant. You have Dupinder again in this. Well, not Dupinder himself, but the actor who plays him. And again, he's not funny. And so you managed to take Dupinder, who was one of the best hidden gems of Deadpool, and you made him not funny, which is just awful. I think the CG was fairly crass. It looked many times it was sort of verging on kind of Attack of the Clones-esque, kind of Star Wars-y, and it just didn't work for me. And again, you had a couple of instances whereby there were Easter eggs and, oh look guys, we're making a reference to the original film, isn't it great? And no, it just felt cheap and rubbish. I mean, the saving grace of the film for me was actually Leslie Jones. I didn't think McKinnon's character was particularly a saving grace, as some people think. I mean, she was just weird. I mean, it was a character, but it was like a character that had jumped out of... And I think that one of the very best analogies that I've heard today, somebody said that the look and feel of the film and the special effects is like... it's like an R-rated... It's not R-rated, it's 12 here, but in the UK. But it's like a PG-13 or R-rated version of Scooby-Doo. And that's exactly how it feels. The look of the film, the design of the film, the design of the special effects, the look of the ghosts, it really has that kind of Scooby-Doo feel about it. And I didn't particularly enjoy those films. And funnily enough, I didn't particularly enjoy this film either. I'm less angry about the film now than I was when I got home last night, and I genuinely cross with it and just thought this was, peeing all over our childhood or throwing petrol on it and just lighting the match and going, ah! Which actually felt quite offended about. But I think had they actually just completely ignored the previous Ghostbusters film, it would have been better. Because, as I said, in the last 45 minutes, up until the end... Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I said 6, didn't I? I've gone through them all. Number 5, the baddie is pointless. There was no exposition of what he's doing or why he's doing it. He's just this kind of strange being who turns up and goes, Oh yes, you will all die. And just walks off. And the first of the machines that we see in the film, which is under the minor spoiler, he's basically using machines to pull in ghosts. Again, why? I don't really, even after watching the film, I don't understand why. The very first time I saw it, I thought it was a magnet that was being used to pull a vase off a cabinet, which a ghost guy, the tour in the spooky house, blah blah blah, and he's giving a talk, and a candelabra falls over. I thought that the little machine had made the candelabra fall over as part of his gig. I had no idea it was related to the actual guy until about half an hour, 45 minutes into the film, I saw him making one. Completely missed it. It just didn't. So overall, not a great film. As I said, I think if they'd ignored all of the original Ghostbusters and just basically said, look, we're doing our own thing, or if it had been a film where the original Ghostbusters, have got to the end of their rope and they have some, fierce battle and they get injured or maybe get killed, and they pass the torch on, that could have worked. But overall, it was just adequate, really, at best, and the amount of money that the film's been spent, and particularly the name that it took, I just really feel that it wasn't really a particularly great walk in the park for anybody involved, and I wouldn't be surprised if nobody's talking about this. Another point that was made, I think it was on Twitter, so I read somebody said this is Jurassic World. What Jurassic World is to Jurassic Park, Ghostbusters is to the original Ghostbusters, and I think that's fair. I don't think either of these two modern reboots are even in the same league as their originals, which were interesting and doing something completely different for the time. So that's my rant. It's not less angry than I thought it would be, actually. But I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to start trying to do more film reviews, more general reviews, etc., because apparently somebody likes listening to the sound of my voice. Other than me, I know. And thanks for watching, guys. Take care.